Hey gang, welcome back. Today's video will be on two films, both of which have excellent twist endings, so if you haven't seen them, I definitely recommend checking them out, perhaps at your local library. Also, I'm combining these because upon rewatching the others for this video, I realized that the writer-director Alejandro Amenbar also made Open Your Eyes, which Vanilla Sky is a remake of. They also both came out in 2001, and at its release, the others received critical acclaim, whereas Vanilla Sky kind of moved into obscurity and became more of a cult classic. Beginning first with the others, a brief synopsis is, after being left by the man of the house who's gone off to war, a family hires some housekeepers to help them run the property, but slowly signs of ghosts become more and more obvious. The hauntings by these others causes a strain on the family until it is revealed that they themselves are in fact the ghosts, and the hauntings are actually signs of life leading into their land of the dead. What a twist, right? Before things get too spooky though, we witness Nicole Kidman's character Grace telling her children the biblical story of the 7-day creation. And throughout the film, we'll see a shift in the dynamic between Grace and her daughter Anne regarding their religious beliefs, Anne naturally questioning and Grace holding firm in her belief and giving little explanation. As the film progresses, Anne's faith in her mother wanes and is quite poignant after Grace's know-it-all stance, especially considering the twist. She professed to know what happens after death, as well as other biblical facts, but as it turned out, they had been dead a while without realizing, and their afterlife was nothing like what Grace had claimed. It's only after their realization when Anne asks where Limbo is that Grace concedes.
If we're dead, where's Limbo? I don't know if there even is a Limbo. I'm no wiser than you are. But I do know that I love you. I've always loved you.
Something Miss Mills mentions after the revelation is that they must all learn to coexist, the living and the dead. And there may be something here, as it's a topic I've been seeing pop up a lot recently, being the development of one's ability to communicate with the dead. Granted, I've also seen a good deal of warnings against this, but that could all just be fear programming. I'd say the primary meaning behind the film, much like in Vanilla Sky, is the idea of the living dead. Who is the living dead? Is it vampires and zombies? Or are we the living dead? Living physically, but dead in spirit, perhaps? Or is our world already a purgatory of sorts? A hell? Maybe you've come across this theory before, and if not, I invite you to look into it for yourself. I touched a bit on the topic of Earth as being a kind of hell in my video on Shutter Island, so feel free to check that out. The shift one makes when awakening can be a lot like what the characters in these movies experience, living unconsciously in one way or another, and then awakening to the truth of their reality, the truth behind their illusionary bodies and surrounding world. Now let's move on to Vanilla Sky. Like I mentioned earlier, Vanilla Sky is the remake of a Spanish film called Abre los ojos, which translates to Open Your Eyes, a line that's used in both films and is a subtle summation of the message, as in, open your eyes, you're living in a dream world. The original came out in 1997 and did fairly well at Sundance Film Festival, apparently impressing director Crowe enough to have him campaign for a remake. Guest starring alongside Tom Cruise is Penelope Cruz, who is reprising her role from the original. A short, spoilery synopsis is, the sole heir to a fashion magazine empire learns a hard yet valuable lesson in how to live and treat others. After his choices indirectly lead to him being disfigured, he signs up to replace his world with an artificially generated lucid dream, which eventually turns to a nightmare. By this I mean he starts to hallucinate his girlfriend Sophia as being the woman he scorned, which led to his disfigurement. This in turn leads to him killing Sophia by mistake, which is why he's locked up retelling his story to his psychiatrist, played by Kurt Russell. They cut back and forth telling how he met Sophia at his birthday party, that they hit it off in a way he doesn't usually do with women, being romantically, not just physically. Just ask Julie Gianni, played by Cameron Diaz, who, in a jealous rage, drives them both off a bridge. We also learned that due to him being in a coma, surgeons were unable to operate on his face, which was damaged in the crash. And after a period of seclusion, he reaches back out to Sophia as well as his friend Brian. But naturally, things are different now. We're initially led to believe Sophia comes back for David the next morning, and the film continues on with the dream unraveling as previously mentioned. But after remembering about Life Extension, a cryogenics company, the doc takes David there where they learn that he had in fact signed up for their services, and that everything we experienced after the club was all a dream. Which was part of the service they provide in freezing him, something they tried to warn him about in the restaurant when he ran into tech support, who tells him he has to take control of his life and overcome his fears, something I think we could all do a little bit more with. When referring to the other people in the room, he tells him, "You are their god. You can make them obey you or destroy you," continuing with, "Maybe they're only here because you wanted them here." This feels like it's hinting at those with whom we share our lives. The ego doesn't see the bigger picture and the role each person plays in our story, and so often condemns them to the no love zone or bare minimum love zone. This comment on being their god isn't to suggest a sort of solipsistic god complex, but more of a loving god complex. Like he says, you can make them obey you or destroy you, depending on the love you're willing to give or withhold. When he finally remembers the truth, he calls for tech support and the two take a long elevator ride to the roof. Along the way, we learn what really happened, like having never seen Sophia again, as well as working things out with his company and discovering Life Extension. Then, after signing up and committing suicide, had his lucid dream life spliced into the memory of his real life, beginning the morning after the night at the club. We also learn it's been a full century since his death, and they can bring him back to life and fix his face. But it would mean having to leave his dream world behind, including Sophia. Interesting that her name is Sophia and is a part of his attachment to this dream world, when in Gnosticism we find the Aeon Sophia, who is believed to have directly or indirectly led to the creation of our dream world. You know, originally I felt tech support represented beliefs of spirit guides aiding us in our journeys, but this last line from the restaurant makes me wonder if perhaps he's something else.
You and I signed a contract, David.
He tells David they've had a team monitoring his every thought, which is a theory I've heard before in regards to how our experience works, though I've also heard the contrary. He also points out how David barely knew Sophia in his life, but that in the dream, she was his savior. Divine feminine. Eventually, David reaches the rooftop to what he's told is his true moment of choice, i.e. waking up or continuing dreaming. Tech support tells him he chose this last fear to face, being heights, as the means to wake up. I wonder if this suggests we're closer to awakening when we're more willing to face our fears, since much of the reason we live the 9-to-5 nightmare is ultimately the fear of discomfort, pain, and death. Before jumping, he manifests Sophia and apologizes to her for getting in the car with Julie, saying he lost her at that moment. He then mentions something she had told him the night they met, that every passing moment is a chance to turn it all around. With one final look at his dream girl, he jumps. And side note here, I remember as a kid, even before seeing this film, that whenever I'd find myself in a nightmare, I would instinctually run to some edge and jump in order to wake myself up. Just a funny coincidence, I thought. After his fall, we get some flashes of images that may have been meant to be his memories from childhood, but I think maybe referencing life of man in general, being the dream of God. Well, that about sums up our little double feature video here. The others is a little less on the nose than Vanilla Sky, but when rewatching it a few years ago, that whole living dead purgatory earth symbolism really stood out to me, so I'm happy to finally share it on here. As for Vanilla Sky, as David finally learns at the end, when it comes to life and relationships, well...
The little things. There's nothing bigger, is there?